Today we're going to talk about the many checkpoints that you can veer off a slippery slope. I've been thinking about habits a lot and like how to actually think about habits. I have a couple of other videos about how to frame habits in your mind. I will link those all down below. The thing I want to talk about today is something that I thought about a lot when I was very easily triggered. When I was easily triggered, it starts with the trigger, and then I felt like it went a really slippery slope down to depression, but what in this video I'm going to call collapse. So the anxiety, the depression, the inability to function, like all of that stuff, that's the collapse. Now, something that I thought about a lot when I was in that state, when I was very easily triggered to not be able to do things, I felt like I started off days here, and once upon a time, it used to be like this, like a ziggurat. And there's a lot of little, like, usually the trigger would happen and I would go down one, and then I'd be able to just take a step back up. Or maybe I would go down a couple, and then I would have to, like, I could rest there, brush myself off, figure things out, and then with whatever mind I had, I could climb up to at least this next level, and then keep going eventually, and then start the next day off here. When I was in a bad place, I felt like this slope was made out of the smoothest, glassiest marble, and like I would be living here most of the time, but then if the trigger happened, I would go right here, and then I'd go zoop right down to the bottom, zoop, and then I would actually live down here most of the time. Triggers can be a lot of things. It could be anything, really. It doesn't have to be like something where people say like trigger warning. A trigger can be anything. It's personal. Everything that happens to you is completely personal. No one can understand what your trigger is without living in your shoes, right? So the goal is not to completely avoid triggers. There's of course going to be some things that you do avoid to keep yourself safe. Again, everyone's different, but because triggers can be anything, and you can't control everyone and what everyone's going to do, and you can't control everything that's going to happen, there are going to be triggers in your life. So whatever that trigger is, it can elicit some things. So give me a second, let me write this all out. So in my journey to do more helpful habits and helpful behaviors and try to minimize and eliminate unhelpful behaviors or bad habits, I have been learning about these little checkpoints that you can find yourself at the more you are aware of what's going on. So there's the trigger, and then there's the low mood, then there's the bad thoughts, then there's the lapse, then there's the relapse, and then there's the collapse. So before you even get to the bad thoughts, like even the intrusive thoughts or the repetitive thoughts or like the cyclical thoughts or the spiraling thoughts, before you even get there, you're going to have this little checkpoint at the low mood. Before you even have any thoughts about anything, you're doing something that's unhelpful. For example, if your relapse would be like eating or drinking a lot of alcohol or something, you're already driving to the bar or the alcohol store. I don't even know what those are called, or the restaurant that has the drinks that are easy to drink, or even if it's just some some place in your home where like you're already going there because you're in a bad mood, and you haven't even had the thoughts of relapse yet. If you can find yourself in the low mood and you might not even know why, you can maybe acknowledge the low mood, say that, tell yourself it's okay and you're safe, and maybe you figure out what the trigger was and maybe you don't, and it's okay if you don't. But sometimes actually figuring it out can be helpful in helping yourself stopping from going all the way down this slope next time. Sometimes experiencing your bad habits sometimes, and like really being very very mindful of how you're feeling before, after, during, and like what you're thinking before, after, during, and how your body is responding before, after, and during when you're having these unhelpful behaviors. That can really help you the next time and be more mindful of what's going to happen the next time. Pay more attention to the negative consequences that happen as they're happening, instead of only focusing on the good feeling of what it feels like to be drunk, or what it feels like to eat sugar, or whatever else might be happening. Sorry, the birds are chirping. I'm not sorry the birds are chirping. I'm sorry the phone is probably picking up a lot of their chirps. When you're at the low mood, you want to make sure you don't go to the bad thoughts. Try to go back here. Maybe figure out the trigger, maybe not, but just try to bring yourself out of the low mood and figure out what's happening. But sometimes it's going to happen that you have the trigger, you go to the low moods, and you start having the bad thoughts before you even realize it. And you're not always going to be able to stop yourself from getting to this point. But once you identify where you're at, you want to try to get out of it before you start to keep on going down. So the goal is to stay at one of these platforms or go up and not let yourself go down. So if you're at the bad thoughts, you're having the thoughts like, if I have this drink, I'm going to feel better. If I have this drink, I'm not going to feel this way anymore. If I have this drink, I'm going to forget about this, etc., etc., etc. Or even, I want to be bad today. Bad stuff happened to me today, so I want to be bad. Bad stuff happened to me today, so I don't matter. So it doesn't matter what I choose. It doesn't matter if I choose to do the bad thing to myself. I'm only hurting myself. It doesn't matter. So those kind of bad thoughts, or bad thoughts like those kind of bad thoughts can happen after your low mood happens. When you get there, you want to stop yourself because you are on the on ramp to the lapse. Now, if you're stopping bad thoughts, or if you're cutting out addiction, I'm not an addiction specialist, by the way, so this is just what works for me. If it works for you, that's great. Like, I'm not a licensed professional at all. It's always good to see a licensed professional. There's no person in the world who couldn't benefit from therapy. So it's good to see that. But I'm just saying, this is one of the things that I've been thinking about when it comes to habits. Going from the bad thoughts, you haven't lapsed yet. You haven't had the drink yet. You haven't uh, overeaten yet. You haven't, I don't know, driven recklessly. A lot of people have a lot of different things that they might do. So you haven't done the unhelpful behavior yet, but you're having the bad thoughts that you want to. And you can stop yourself from going from the bad thoughts to the lapse. This part, I think, is the most important part. If you are really mindful and paying a lot of attention to what it feels like to be down here, you can stop yourself from going from the bad thoughts to the lapse. You can't always control what your thoughts are going to be saying. If you take a second to breathe, if you take a minute to meditate, if you take an hour to go for a walk and walk away from the situation, or to just let your thoughts run their course before you get to the lapse. If you take the second or the minute or the hour or the day, the night to sleep on it, the day to focus on something else for a while, the likelihood that the lapse is going to happen decreases a lot. Now, of course, sometimes the lapse is going to happen. Sometimes you're going to overindulge in dessert or something like that if that's your unhelpful habit, or you're going to fill in the blank. Sometimes that's going to happen. That doesn't mean that you are a person that does this. It just means that you are a person that did that once. There's this phrase falling off the wagon. It doesn't mean that you've fallen off the wagon. It just means that this is a behavior that you participated in. Don't turn that lapse into a judgment on yourself. And you're like, this is, you don't want to start having the looping thoughts. So sometimes bad thoughts will also come in here. You don't want to start having the looping thoughts that say, I can't stop this bad habit. I can't start these good habits. I don't want to waste my time anymore. I keep on trying this and it doesn't work. So I might as well just let myself continue on with the bad habits that have a little bit of a reward, but a lot of bad consequences. I'd rather just have that little bit of a reward because I can't do it. So those bad thoughts can start to happen here between the lapse and the relapse. Don't, like, instead of letting yourself believe that and having the bad thoughts all the time, fill yourself with good thoughts. Like I said, you can't always control what thoughts happen, but you can fill your cup with so many good thoughts about yourself. I can do this. I've done this before. I've climbed up to this top of this mountain before, and I've been living up here before. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I have done this. It is already so. And you can start filling yourself with those kind of thoughts, and that is a good way to stop yourself from going from lapse to relapse. Now, I think the hardest part, and the part that luckily we as all people don't have as much experience with, is stopping the relapse from turning into a collapse of your entire life. Sometimes you can have a bad habit for a long, long time. You're still living your life. You're still having the good things that you have in your life, but it hasn't destroyed everything yet. But sometimes there's just like a little push in that direction. So the more you let this relapse happen, the more likely you're going to be able to fall into the collapse. Stopping the relapse, that's going to be the hardest part. So if you can stop it here, 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 or here, that's going to be really good. Instead of thinking of it as just, I need to avoid all triggers all the time because that's going to happen, there's a lot of stopping points where you can find yourself and get yourself back up to how you felt before the trigger happened. All of these little areas, there's also a little staircase here, there's a little staircase here, and you can learn what your little staircases are, and you can, if you find yourself on any of these little steps, instead of letting yourself fall down like a slinky, try to get yourself back up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope the visuals of that make sense. If you want to learn more about why I stopped tracking my habits, you can watch that video here. If you're more interested in why I stopped calling my habits and started calling them something else, you can watch this video here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!